If you're shopping for a new Herman Miller Aeron chair, then I'm sure you're fully aware that a fully loaded model is close to $1,700. But I'm sure you're also seeing Aeron Classics being mentioned for anywhere from $300 up to $800. I'm going to walk through the differences between these chairs and make sure to stick around to the end. I'm going to share my opinion on which model I feel is best. The Aeron chair has been out for over 25 years, but in 2016-2017, Herman Miller decided to come out with a new version of the Aeron that they called the Remastered, and the previous version started being called the Classic. Now, the reason that we see such stark price differences is because obviously this is a brand new model, and the Classic's not being produced by Herman Miller anymore, so it's only available on the used market. So you can find it for as cheap as $300 on places like Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace from private sellers, or they can go for upwards of $800–900 if they're fully refurbished with some nice policies. One thing to consider is that the 12-year warranty from Herman Miller is only going to apply to the brand new chair purchased from them or an authorized dealer. Buying the Classic chair secondhand is not going to come with the manufacturer's warranty because the warranty is non-transferable. From a design standpoint, the chairs are almost identical, but there are going to be a few slight tweaks that Herman Miller made just to modernize the look of the Aeron, and that's going to start with the base. So when we look at the base on the Classic, it's going to be an aluminum base with more of a rounded design, and they've moved to a plastic base with more of a modern design with some nice cutouts. Now, I know a lot of people initially want to say this is a downgrade and Herman Miller cheaping out by going with plastic. This is kind of the direction that all manufacturers are going. Now that we have such high-end plastics, we can achieve the same type of durability and a nicer look as opposed to the aluminum base that can lose its paint and scratch over time. So while many people consider this to be a downgrade, I don't necessarily consider that to be the case. A couple areas where we see some noticeable differences are also going to be around the mech, the buttons, and the knobs. So their goal was to just make the new Aeron a little bit more sleek, and so that's why they have a slimmed down mechanism. The cables are a little bit more hidden, and they just updated the button design to be a little bit more sleek to go with the rest of the chair. And the other major difference you're going to see when it comes to looks is just going to be the basic mesh pattern. The new updated 8Z pellicle mesh is a better design in my opinion than the previous pellicle mesh, and it does look slightly different on the chairs. Along with the looks of the chair being very similar, so are the sizing options. We only see a couple minor differences with the size A and the size C. Basically, the size A on the Remastered can fit slightly smaller individuals, and the size C on the Remastered can fit slightly larger individuals. And one other change was that they went from 300 pounds to a 350-pound weight rating on the size B and C for the Remastered as compared to the Classic. When looking at the backrest, the sizes are basically identical, and the mesh isn't different enough to change the way that the chairs feel, in my opinion. The one major difference is going to be with the lumbar support options. So if you just go with the height adjustable lumbar support, the Classic model is just going to have this basic pad system, and you can pull the pad out and flip it around. It's basically going to have two modes of less support and more support. In my opinion, this is not a great system. I do not think that the pad or pillow, whatever they call it, is super comfortable, and I feel that it's more of kind of digging into your back than being a soft, accommodating feature. So I'm not a huge fan of this. Unfortunately, we don't have the basic height adjustable version on the Remastered, but it does look like a nice option if you just need something like that. Another major difference is going to come if you upgrade to the Posture Fit. Now, on the Classic, it's just called Posture Fit, whereas on the Remastered, it's called the Posture Fit SL, and they are going to be quite a bit different, with the Posture Fit on the Remastered covering a much more vertical space and also giving you the ability to change the tension on the Posture Fit, dialing it in or out based on your preferences, whereas the standard Posture Fit on the Classic is not going to have the option to move it up or down or change the tension. And to be honest, I don't really notice much support at all coming from the Posture Fit on the Classic, and when I used the chair without any lumbar support at all, it felt very similar. And so I do think that the Posture Fit SL is a pretty massive upgrade to the standard Posture Fit on the Classic. The seats is where we're going to see a pretty big difference between the two chairs. When we look at the mesh is designed a little differently, but I don't think that's going to be a big contributing factor to them feeling different. The mesh feels pretty similar on both chairs. The big difference is going to come from the way that the seat is pitched forward slightly on the remastered, 1.8 degrees more forward, making it a little bit easier to work in tasking applications, and then also the way that the front of the seat is designed. So we'll first look at the Classic. The Classic, basically their way to make the front of the chair avoidable and not uncomfortable on the back of your legs or your thighs was to introduce this padding system. And so they have this pad here at the front of the seat. The problem is that when you sit down in the chair, the mesh is going to sink lower than the pad. So I can stand up and show you here with my hand. You can see that when I push down, it's lower than this pad here. And so when I sit there, I can feel this pad on the back of my legs, and it's a really firm pushing feeling. It's, in my opinion, very uncomfortable, and you really can't avoid this. You're going to feel this all the time, and it's probably the biggest reason why I cannot use the Classic chair. So to make improvements upon this, they decided to go away from the pad and have a more pitched design. And because of this, you no longer have this creasing area, like there would be a pad here. You can see there's no pad. You can see my fingers through here. And it's a much better design because there is no crease, and so it's just a straight rolled design, much more consistent, and you don't feel that on the back of your legs. And because the whole seat is pitched a little bit more forward, I don't have the problem of feeling the front of the seat on the back of my legs all the time. Depending on where I position them, if I'm like this stretching them, then I certainly do. But overall, I think it's a better design than the pad system. Another major difference between these two chairs is the way that they recline. So we'll start with the Aeron Classic, and the first thing that you're going to notice when I sit down in the chair and recline is the pivot point is very far forward, basically right behind my knees, almost like a standard knee tilt. And it's not a bad feeling, it's a nice motion. There's a couple problems that I have with it. One is it's very difficult to get all the way back to the fully reclined mode unless you really, really loosen up the tension. But doing so makes it almost impossible to bring the chair up anywhere past like here. And so it's very difficult to get all the way back like this. But then the secondary problem is it's impossible to sit upright while having your back against the backrest, because once you get to about here and you want to sit up any further, you have to take your back off the backrest. You're not getting that support. And so using it fully upright is not great, and using it fully reclined is not great. You almost have to use it in this intermediary position, which I'm not a huge fan of when tasking. They went away from this design on the remastered, not only with the seat being pitched forward, that 1.8 degrees that we talked about earlier, but also just with the pivot point of the chair being pushed back a little bit, along with the tension settings, allows you to have your back on the backrest easily through the entire motion. So I can go all the way back without a problem. I don't have to exert my muscles and feel like I'm getting an ab workout to do this. And I can also come all the way forward with my back being supported. So you're getting the full range of the chair. You can use it in much more positions than the Classic, and I think it's just overall a much more comfortable experience. Piggybacking off the recline functions, we're also going to see two differences in adjustments when it comes to reclining your chair. The first being the tilt limiter function. So on the Classic chair, they actually gave you what they called infinite tilt limiter. And you can use this knob here. When you've got it fully down, it's going to give you the full range. When you've got it fully up, it's going to give you the least amount of range. And then you can turn this dial anywhere in between there to change how much you're going to be allowed to recline. And you're going to have a ton of positions to choose from because it is infinite. Swapping over to the remastered, they decided to go away from the infinite system and limit you to 3 positions. So you can use it fully upright, a mid position, and then fully open, giving you the full range. So much more control over your tilt limiter positions with the Classic. The other difference that we're going to see is with the tension adjustment. So the remastered chair really updated the tension adjustment and making it much more responsive. So if you turn this knob here, you adjust the tension. On the remastered chair, you only really need to turn it 2 or 3 times to notice a huge difference. So this is very, very loose. If I turn it a couple times this way, it's going to be extremely tight now. And so you really only need to turn it a little bit to dial it in, whereas the previous version is like most chairs' tension adjustment, where you have to turn the knob a ton of times to see a difference. Not as much as most chairs, but you're still going to turn this knob maybe 15, 20 times to get the same type of results as we're going to see on the remastered knob being turned 3 or 4 times. So that's definitely something to think about. If you're going to be reclining in your chair, think about how you use the chair. If you use the tension a lot, you'd probably want to go remastered. If you're using tilt limiter lock, maybe the classic is better. We do see some differences in the arms on both of these chairs, starting with the classic chairs that were made before 2005. So chairs that were produced from 1994 up until 2004 are going to have the original arm height adjustment design, which is going to be this dial system. So you turn the dial, it'll loosen up the arm, you can move it up or down, and then you tighten it back in place and it will lock it. Now, obviously not a very user-friendly design. It was nice at the time that it came out, but quickly became a little bit obsolete, and that's why they came out with the lever system, which is still being used on the remastered. So you just unlock the arm, move it up or down, and lock it back in place. The next major difference we're going to see is going to be in the adjustability. The fully loaded classic arms are going to give you height adjustment and then pivot adjustment, whereas the fully adjustable arms on the remastered are going to give you that height adjustment, pivot adjustment, but also depth adjustment, which I found to be very helpful for my setup simply because I do use a keyboard tray and a mouse tray, and being able to back the arm pad away from my mouse tray was very helpful. So definitely something to consider if you're using a task-intensive application. The final difference between the arms is going to be the caps themselves, the arm pads. And the remastered arm pads are simply going to be a lot more comfortable than the classic arm pads. They're just a lot softer, much more comfortable on your arm. And I think that these are probably the most comfortable arm pads I've used, whereas the arm pads on the classic are going to be more middle of the road. Not bad, but not great. And I also think that you're going to get more longevity out of the design with the remastered because they do have one fused product with the pad to the mold as compared to the previous design where they've got more of a sock system and they're stapling the pad to the mold, which can create some failure points. While the look and the design of the two chairs is still going to be very similar, they are quite a bit different when it comes to comfort and the way that they function. Now, a lot of people like to knock the new Aeron because it doesn't have the aluminum base or because they went away from the infinite tilt, but in my opinion, the remastered is a massive upgrade to the classic. Not only is it more comfortable, it has a lot better functionality, and in my opinion, it's a nicer looking chair overall. So what you are giving up with the infinite tilt and the aluminum base, you are certainly gaining in overall comfort, overall longevity, the look of the chair, the whole shebang in my opinion. And so I certainly would have no problem recommending the remastered, but if you're looking to save 50% or more, then the classic is still going to be a nice option for those of you that would like an Aeron chair. If you're looking for more Aeron chair content, check out our review of the Aeron Remastered.